Oh, yeah, we're supposed to read out loud.
Okay.
Okay, book buddy.
Here we go.
You start.
You want me to start?
Yeah, because we're starting here.
Oh. Okay. Who's the character I'm reading?
Well, it was from yesterday.
So yesterday, we're in the middle of Boris.
Skunk.
Okay, here we go. My sudden shift in tone startled her. Who are coming for me? She asked. The two-leggers, I explained. The predators. I've tried my best to keep them at bay. I've used all the tricks that I have at my meager disposal, but I fear I have failed you. Her face sagged, but she did not crumple. I suspect she had experienced similar news in the past. You say that you've been protecting me? Yes, I replied, from your first night in the forest when I spied you alone in despair. I went on to explain all my ruses. She nodded slowly. For a moment she was lost among thoughts, no doubt turbulent. But then her eyes softened, and she looked at me. She looked at me and smiled. Thank you, Boris. Thank you for allowing me these days of freedom. Thank you for granting me days of life that I would never have had otherwise. Thank you. And this time I did weep. How could I not? This child, this beautiful child. Yes, I wept. She came over to me, leaned down, and nuzzled my fur. It's all right, she whispered. It's all right, Boris. It's over. I'll prepare myself to meet them. What? Surrender? No, I shouted. What I mean is, no, that's not what I mean, you must get away, not give up. I have contacts, trustworthy as far as such creatures go. I will ask them to help. Yes, they will smuggle you out.
Audrey, Cal. Smuggle me out, but to where? I asked him. Where else is there for me to hide? Boris was insistent that I not lose hope. This forest is vast, young lady. It stretches beyond the two-leggers' roads, you'll see. But getting away will be difficult if they are looking for you. It must be done under cover of darkness. There are professionals who can guide you. I'll arrange for them to escort you this very night. Be ready. Please be safe. And then Boris, who had been my protector all along, who nobly and secretly kept me safe for no other reason than out of the decency of his dear, dear heart, that generous yet ferocious soul took his leave as humbly as he had come to me. I stood alone in the meadow, wondering what was to happen next. Could I continue on to someplace else? A place without a clearing or barn or Doris and her family? How could I carry on without any of these things? How could I possibly make a home elsewhere? Then I looked at the house at the far end of the meadow, collapsed and rotten, hollow and sad, and I laughed at my foolishness. I had no home. I was only pretending this was a home, the way little girl Elspeth served imaginary tea to her dolls when she was smaller. Homestead Meadow was not Bittersweet Farm. My nights were spent in a cage, not in a barn, and they were populated, not with real friends and family, but only with memories of them. And Doris, as much as I had grown to love her like a sister, could not be my sister if my presence might lead to her harm. I had to move on. I had to believe that there was a home for me somewhere out there. Evening was approaching. I headed into the woods, and I needed to tuck Doris in and say my goodbyes and then wait for Boris's friends.
Oliver Raccoon. Righty right, Boris, and us go way back. Can't get into the particulars, mind you, because, and stop me if I get too technical, one is beholden to the statuses of limits regarding laws upheld in certain places and jurisdictions. Ipso facto, any discussion might be deemed as a confession of sorts. So you might say we'd be self-incriminating ourselves if you follow my train of thought. Ask Stan if I'm correct in my summation.
Stan, Raccoon. He most certainly is. Why, Oliver.
Oliver Raccoon. Righty right, there you go. But to the point, if something needs to be smuggled in or smuggled out, Stan and me, we're the ones to get the job done. As to the job in question, we were to pick up a package at the far end of Homestead Meadow a couple of owl hoots past midnight.
Doris, dear. Audrey gave me an extra long story time that night, full of funny bits involving Eddie, who is a creature called a dog but sounds awfully like a wolf, and Buster, who I don't even know what he is. And there's this bird called a rooster who can't fly but has to holler every dawn, which I would personally find too stressful because a fawn needs her mornings quiet. Oh yeah, I loved Audrey's stories. That girl could spin a tale like no one else. And after she said happily ever after, then we both recited the poem she made up just for me. My forest bed is veiled and soft. It keeps me safe. It keeps me sound. I close my eyes and gently sleep. Toward my dreams I now am bound.
June, dear. I was hard on the girl. I suppose I was afeard to let her into my heart, in case I might make reckless decisions. In the forest you only get yourself but one chance. But on that evening, after she tucked Doris in, I took her aside. I told Audrey that I wished her luck and happiness on her long journey. I told her she was a good girl, and that her mamma would done be proud to have such a kind and courageous daughter. Weren't much to say, but I felt it was something important for her to hear.
Humphrey, human. There was an old abandoned farmstead deep in the forest that I discovered in some old maps we had on file back at the office. It belonged to the Doolittle clan, an early pioneer family. Standard tracking methods were getting us nowhere in this hunt. What was required was to get into the head of a cow, to think how a cow thinks, and figure out how she might cope in her new environment. This is what led me to conclusion that the old farm was where I'd find Audrey. Whatever cleared fields there were had likely grown over decades ago, but the general layout of the farm might be familiar to a domestic bovine. Cow. Yeah. To make it irresistible for Audrey, I decided to plant some decoys to lure her in, and then, like a duck hunter waiting in a blind, I would set up a position on the edge of the clearing, ready to take her down just past dawn.
Claudette, cougar. Not in my nature to hunt in daylight. Make an exception for stupid Charolais. Can't take her when she's in her barn cave. Wait for her to come out. Wait silently at the meadow edge. Wait for morning to break. Then I take Charolais down.
Torchy, human. The Audrey escapades were reaching the end, see? Old Humph grew all steely-eyed and determined. The hunters were closing in, and the curtains were about to come down on the show. If that brave bovine had another ace up her sleeve, this would have been the time to play it. Sure, I wanted the story to continue. I got a job to do. But then, I suppose, so does old Humph. But I had a minute alone with the lady. I'd have told her to scram, to beat it, to hit the road.
Audrey, cow. Want me to do it? Sure, okay. I sat in the barn half the night waiting for my escorts to arrive. My senses were so sharp that I was alert to every sound, sight, and smell that a forest offered. Hour upon hour, my range broadened. The owl hoots, the cricket chirps in the meadow, the frog choruses from the nearby pond, the distant howls. Breezes prodded tree branches and grasses, making their shadows dance and bow. Breezes also brought the heavier scents of moss and mushroom that I ignored during the day, in favor of the flower perfumes that I prefer. But now the flowers were asleep and unconcerned, so I waited and waited, yet did not tire. How surprised I was to hear the scraping and whispers of those two fellows, who had somehow managed to enter the barn undetected, despite my vigilant attention.
Oliver, raccoon. Well, of course she didn't hear us slip in. We're grade A, top-notch professionals we are, and as such, me and Stan possess the qualities of stealth and cunning that allows for sneaky movements. It would hardly do to be picked off by the package prior to arriving at the rendezvous. Ask Stan if I'm correct in my synopsis.
He most certainly is, my Oliver.
Oliver Raccoon. Righty right, then. So, upon meeting the package at the aforementioned place as specified by our old and dear friend, Boris, a.k.a. the skunk, we were immediately smacked in the face by two details. Details that, as pertaining to the successful hush-hush transportation of goods, would be significant problems.
Stan Raccoon. She was huge and white.
Oliver Raccoon. Indeed she was. Indeed she was. Right then, we got ourselves a smuggling liability. Can't perform any easy alterations in the size department, if you follow me. But as pertaining to the bright color adorning the package, making undetected travel difficult, if not impossible, me and Stan reached into our wily bag of craftiness and came up with an inspired plan for camouflage that did the trick, if I do say so myself.
Stan Raccoon.
We covered her in mud, we did.
Oliver Raccoon. Always to the point, my esteemed colleague. Stan. Always to the blunt point. But yes, indeed, we plastered the package.
The package.
Oh, right, the package. In a covering of moist dirt obtained from the bank of the nearby pond. Our scheduled time of departure was appreciably set back, as you can imagine, on account of the sizable canvas we were working with. To take advantage of whatever darkness was still available, we needed to move fast if we were to reach the far side of the forest before dawn.
Audrey Cow. They wanted me to bushwhack through the forest in near total darkness, and they wanted me to do so at a hurried pace. I couldn't see as well as they could, and I was neither small enough nor agile enough to keep up. "Stop," I finally said. "This will not do. At this rate, I will break a leg. Find me another route." My escorts were not pleased with my demand, but even they could see that it was reasonable. There was a wide path marked by 2 bumpy furrows that led away from the meadow. I had been warned by Doris's family never to walk along it. After some debate between Oliver and Stan, we shifted our escape route to that path, even though it was not as safe.
Oliver Raccoon. The first rule of smuggling is to avoid all routes that offer two-leggers ample access to your personage. To put it another way, if they can see you, then they can catch you. As such, the route we were forced to use, which at one time served to connect the Homestead Meadow to the more often used two-legger road, was a big red flag no-no. But righty right, the package. Now I lost my spot. Made our argument, and the sun was itching to ride, so I said to my Stan, I said, our options are few and fraught with challenges. We are tormented by conditions undeserved. The forbidden two-legger road on this occasion offers our only salvation, but let us take comfort in the fact that this thoroughfare is long past in its practical days, and the likelihood of anyone using it is near to nil. That is what I said. Ask Stan if I am correct in my citation.
Stan Raccoon. He most certainly is, my Oliver, word for word.
Oliver Raccoon. So righty right, off we go, traipsing down the long, abandoned, weed-infested, barely a shadow of its former self two-legger road, and you'll never guess what happened. But take a guess, just for fun.
Casey, human.
Oh,
hello. Phew, what a day that was. I went over to Bittersweet Farm with Red Bessie around.